Hello, Bavara here, and here's a new Bavara quick take. Let's talk a little bit about isekais that I enjoy. So, to give you a little bit of background about what isekai is that it is a particular genre of anime that basically translates to another world. Typically, the more general conceit of the genre is that a character is killed and transported to a different world where they have to use their skills and abilities to survive in this world and accomplish a task in this world. At its core, what it is, it's a different take on the sort of the chosen one narrative, where the more traditional chosen one narrative structures your character in a way where basically within them they have some sort of special power and they need some sort of mentor to help them bring it out. Think Star Wars, think Harry Potter, etc. Now, on the other side, what the Isekai states is that a person within them has all the skills that they need. They don't need some sort of special mentor. They're just in the wrong environment where all their skills, talents, and abilities could excel. A lot of what the genre has been historically and traditionally has been really sort of focused on the sort of the video game nerd, where you have the character who is they are an expert at a particular genre of video game. Most times sort of fantasy, and that they sort of transport in a world where all their sort of knowledge and skills within video games and fantasy can really help them to excel. And that is sort of the dichotomy of the here sort of more or less chosen one narrative versus the sort of isekai style narrative. There's also the secondary conceit where in this other world they are typically the smartest, the strongest, the sexiest, the most attractive, and it's sort of a sort of wish fulfillment process of the nerd character. And that is what the sort of genre is to a large extent. And a lot of animes in the past, basically 5 to 10 years, have really been focused on this genre, and also a lot of writing in terms of manga, light novels, etc., have also been super heavily on this genre because of the fact that this genre sells. And like I said before, as you can probably imagine, the genre sells because the genre itself is so heavily focused on this wish fulfillment fantasy of, hey, I actually am good enough. I'm just not in the right environment. And that fantasy is a very strong one to people, and that's a big reason why it sells so well. And there is a lot to say about whether or not this sort of look in this fantasy look on things is negative or positive. And when you sort of compare this to a lot of what animes were focusing on in the early 2000s, in the mid 2000s, when I was really more heavily watching and consuming anime, which is more focused on the economic insecurity of people and the whole one day you'll be rich sort of, like either one day you'll be rich sort of narratives, or hey, you're poor, but guess what? Everyone else is poor and everything else sucks, so suck it up, which was the sort of the big narrative focus of those times and versus what it is now. Now, like the title of the video says, what isekai animes do I actually enjoy? And this is sort of a tough one because at the end of the day, I don't watch that many isekai animes. As if you've seen my previous video talking about my top 5 animes I'd like to see Netflix adapt, you'll probably notice a pattern there that really, like, basically none of them are sort of shown in action. And because that's really not a genre that I ever really enjoyed or really engaged with to a large extent, even though that is definitely the largest genre of anime that exists. So, what isekais have I enjoyed? There's sort of 2 that I actually have enjoyed that are fairly recent. The first one I'll talk about very briefly, and the other one I'll talk about in a little more detail. In both, I'll probably have to go into minor spoilers of the story structure, as well as sort of some plot elements. So when I talk about either one, if you don't want to watch it and want to hear me talk about it, that's fine. The first one is My Life as a Villainess, All Roads Lead to Doom. And this is also something very interesting about the Isekai genre, is that they always sort of have these overly long, overly descriptive titles to them. And I think a lot of it really sort of do with like, it sort of like hooks the person who wants to read it because they sort of have a general concept of what's going to be in that particular title. So they sort of have sort of longer hooks. But my life as a villain is an interesting one, partially because it still plays off of the fantasy of the nerd going to a world where their skills are useful, but it changed the genre from an action genre to a romance game genre. So basically, a romance game, a dating sim game is the more common colloquialism term for it. And it basically says that it has this girl who basically knows a ton about this particular dating sim game, and she's killed, transported to this other world where she is in the dating sim game, but she's the villain of the dating sim game. And the whole conceit is that, oh no, I'm the villain of the dating sim game. I know that there's basically two things happen to the villain. Either she gets executed or she gets exiled, and there's some unknown path that she never actually finished that is always foreshadowing for the path that she wants to try and go down. And even though the show itself, I think it has a very strong start because it starts on a very different sort of road and path than the typical isekai. I don't think it sort of has this. It doesn't really have a great execution towards the back half of it, partially because of the setup, where the whole setup is that she has to try and solve the problem of not getting killed, but midway through the anime she sort of solves that problem, but the whole conceit becomes, oh, the main character's too stupid to realize she solved her own problem, rather than giving her some sort of secondary challenge or curveball that's thrown at her. The conceit becomes like, oh, she's too stupid to solve the problem, so she's still trying to solve a problem that she already solved. And that part's not great, because I don't think that it was well thought out for that second part of it, even though I do think the anime as a whole is pretty strong, and I do still recommend it. Now, the second anime that I'm going to go into that's a little bit more in depth, because of how I think it sort of tackles some of the core issues within the isekai genre, using the same sort of genre that it's typically utilized into. This one's called Kumo Nani Desuka, which means I'm a spider, so what is the rough translation for it? Where where an entire classroom of kids is isekai'd over to this other world, and the main story sort of follows this spider named, who's I think is actually nameless. I'm pretty sure you never actually know the name of the spider throughout the series. You learn her like her real human name towards the end, but early on she doesn't have a name, and she is sort of fighting monsters in this sort of dungeon because she's supposed to be a dungeon spider, slowly gaining more and more power as she goes along. And one of the main things that I think is interesting about it in sort of story structure is that the way the story is told, since it's focusing on this sort of single solid character for half of it, a lot of the things that this character doesn't know, or this character wouldn't communicate, is not communicated to the audience. Like I said before, things like her name, as well as sort of other minor details about the world around her, is never really communicated to the viewer. The story also, the secondary part of it, focused on the human half of it. So basically you also have the other kids who are also isekai'd over. It focuses on them as well. And one thing I think it does interesting on that side is that the isekai of the students all are drawn very sort of more generically. They're not really given the sort of gravitas that you would normally have from like anime main character or anime side character. They're given a lot less depth and detail to them. And I think this is sort of because of the fact that they sort of represent the more traditional way that this is an isekai in this sort of genre would be done. And because of that, you as the viewer don't sort of give them as much focus. And a lot of the focus that you get from them really sort of comes from the minor exposition about how the world works and how some details about the way the magic in the world works you're supposed to get out of it, as well as sort of the parallel story that's going on of things that the main character, or referred to as Kumo, is doing in the dungeon is affecting the world in the future, because the two stories are separated by a 5-year time gap that sort of bounces back and forth every so often. And those are like two of the main isekais that I've enjoyed recently. Thank you very much.